In this video, I'm going to be teaching you guys the ins and outs of Roblox Studio terrain. So I'm here today with a blank canvas, a brand new base plate if you will. So you may be asking, well, how do I access the terrain in Roblox Studio? Well, I'm about to show you how. To start, all you're going to want to do is press this button right here. It's the terrain editor button. It's right under terrain and to the left of the toolbox. You can click on this and it will open up. And now you'll see 6 different buttons here. There are 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom. The first one, create, that's where we see the generate button, the import button, and the clear button. I'm about to explain what those do in a second. The region button, this has all the move tools, the copy, the resize, all that stuff. And in the edit button, you can see all the different adding and paint, and these are the ones that you're probably going to be using the most in Roblox Studio Terrain. So if I click on create, go over to generate, there should be a huge blue box when you click on generate that will show up. This will show you what needs, what size your terrain's gonna be. I recommend scaling it up from the ground a bit so you can actually see it, and scaling the top down a bit as you can scale it with these little hands on the side. On the left here you can change the position. You can mess around with all these settings such as the size, the position. Now in the material settings you can choose all these different biomes. Water, plains, dunes, mountains, etc. And you can even change the biome size. So in case you want really large biomes, if you're making really large terrain, you can go and set that up to be really large. Otherwise, you can also add caves if you want them to be there or not. And here's where you can change the seed. You can always Google like different Roblox Studio terrain seeds to see which ones you like best. You can always mess around with that. I'm just going to leave mine at 0. Yours might be something different. And now if you click on generate, you should see it starting to generate some terrain right here. It does take a few seconds because it does have to actually automatically make the terrain, but if you give it a while, it'll soon show up. And if you click off generate, you can see the blue box will go away. You can view your terrain nice inside of the region button. You can see this has all these different tools. The select button that when I click and drag, I can select a large portion of my terrain right here. And I can also scale and move around large selection of terrain, I should say. I can click on the move tool over here, and now I can move this terrain around. Now I've also got the resize tool here. I can scale it up, I can scale it to the right. You can do all this sorts of stuff. You can stretch, you can bend, it can do all that. Now if you rotate it, you can see Roblox uses really rough angles. You can copy terrain, move this over, and then paste the terrain. And you can just do all sorts of stuff like that. You can delete the terrain. You can fill the terrain with a certain material, such as concrete right here. I can make a huge concrete box. It's really handy for moving and editing your terrain, I should say. And now for the third and final button, edit. So edit has all the fun things in it, such as the add button. Now the add button, you'll see it's got 3 different brush settings here. The first one is the sphere. You can see where my mouse is, it will automatically put a sphere over it. They've also got things such as the square and the cylinder. And when you click, you can see it'll make a cylinder of grass, because that's the material I have selected down here. The sphere will only have 1 height because it is a sphere. The square and cylinder will have 2 base heights, and will have 1 base height and then an actual height. If you'd like these to be separate, you can click on the little lock icon here, and you can scale these in any which way you'd like to. Now the pivot position, right now it's on the center, so my mouse is always going to be in the center of the cube. If I put it on the bottom, well, my mouse will be at the bottom of this cube. Now if I were to press on top, you can see that my mouse is now at the top of the cube. Now you've got the materials. You can change this to brick, basalt, whatever you want to do, you can go ahead and do that. Now there's also the subtract. It is pretty much the exact same as the add, but the opposite. As you can see, instead of adding, it just subtracts things. So yeah, you can have fun with this, mess around. Go ahead and delete everything if you want to. So here you've also got snap to voxels, which will basically make it move in a grid pattern, in case you want more precise kind of settings for those like me who don't have very steady hands. You've also got ignore water and ignore parts. So say I had a part right here. I can scale this out right here. And I had some terrain on top of it, so I'm going to move this back to center. Yeah, so as you can see, since ignore parts is on, I'm going through the part and I can just add terrain all through here. If I turn off ignore parts, you can see I can now put build on top of the terrain. On top of the part, I mean, so yeah, that's a fun thing to mess around with. Now, I can also add in some water real quick to show you guys. If I turn off ignore water, I can actually go ahead and subtract this water. If I turn on ignore water, you can see how it goes straight through the water and onto the things underneath it. Now, you've also got the grow button. This will go ahead and grow your terrain in a kind of small but short period over time if you leave it there for long enough. And this is great for making little hills and stuff for your player to climb on. Erode does the exact same thing but in reverse. It'll, instead of growing it, it will erode the terrain, making it go down instead of up. The smooth tool will basically smooth out all of your rough edges on the terrain, like this grass up here that is strangely floating on absolutely nothing. I can just smooth out all this terrain. You can see no more floating grass. If I go over to flatten, you can see this will flatten any grass that I don't want to be not flat. You can also mess around with all the different positions and settings on here. Now the paint button, this is the one you're probably going to use the most. This paint thing has got everything you'd probably ever need for terrain making and editing. I can choose the material to something like concrete. And instead of adding, eroding, growing, or subtracting, this one will actually just paint the material right onto the terrain I already have. So now we've got the sea level button. This sea level is used to evaporate or add lots of water. So say I wanted this half of my map to kind of have an ocean. I could just scale this around to make the size of my ocean, and then click on create down here. As you can see now, all that is water. But say I accidentally did that and I only wanted the water to be on the other side. Well, I can either Control Z or click on evaporate. And now all water that was there is now gone. So now we've also got the replace button. This is a pretty big box. I can set the source material of what I want to replace and then replace it with another material. So say I've got all this grass, which you know I do because there's a lot of grass on this terrain. So if I selected grass over here on the source material and then as the target material set it to something like brick, as you can see when I click on replace, it'll then replace every single piece of grass with brick. So this is basically everything you need to know about the terrain editor. So if you exile the terrain editor now and then go to the view tab on the top, over on the left you can go ahead and click on the explorer and the properties, make sure we're all on the same page. So now if they aren't this big when you open them up, you can also click and drag on the side and scale or make them larger. And that is always a good thing to know of. Inside of my workspace right here, I've got a thing called terrain. When I click on this inside of my properties, there's a lot of stuff that shows up. The main thing you're going to be doing in here are these top three though. For the decoration, you know, the grass is poking up, but if I turn off decoration, you can see all that grass is gone. I'm left with just this flat material here. So I always recommend turning on decoration. It definitely gives a nice look to your builds and everything. So now the second one right here are the material colors. If you click on this to expand it, you can see every single material color that's there. I'm going to click on the grass one and I'm going to change this to a much brighter green. Something like this. Now you can see this is much more vibrant and that looks a lot more colorful. You can also change the colors of bricks. If you want those to be green, you can change absolutely anything and everything with the terrain, which is what I especially like about it. You can go ahead and mess around with that with each of the materials, but anyways, inside of the watercolor too, in case you don't like this blue color, you can always change it to something a little more vibrant, like a bright cyan or turquoise. Anyways, all this other things you can turn on the water reflectance if you want the water to be shiny or glossy and all that. There's also the water transparency, depends on how thick or how not thick you want it to be. And there's the water wave size, you can bring this up or down. Also with the water wave speed, if I turn this all the way up, you can see I've kind of got a big blob of jello here. So you can always have lots of fun with all this water. With all the terrain, It's definitely an underrated aspect of Roblox Studio because it has many uses which are very handy when it comes to using Roblox Studio and especially building. So I'd always recommend using terrain, building with terrain if you can or if you want to, because it's definitely fun to mess around with even if you aren't building something. So in conclusion, terrain in Roblox Studio is definitely a must-have for building. I wouldn't say so much for like simulator games. I'd recommend using parts and even mesh parts for that if you're just gonna build a fun map. But it's always fun to mess around with terrain, whether you're building something or just really bored in Roblox Studio. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video as much as I did, make sure you like and subscribe down below. Also, don't forget to comment your ideas of what you would like to see next in Roblox Studio.